The story you're about to hear is basically my response to she breasted boobily down the stairs. So do beware a trigger warning for male objectification, even though there is no harassment, there is no essay attempt or anything of that nature. It is in the person's head. And I'm also playing around with language around male and female verbiages and how society is looked on both sides of the equation. I hope you enjoy. In all the offices, in all the world, he had to be in mine. It was a late afternoon. The morning had been dreary, and it looked like night would be the same. A light drizzle hung on the city like dresses without a slip. My secretary greeted me when I got close to the door. He handed me my mail and some messages, but neglected to let me know about the stranger in my office. He was a good kid, but not the smartest. Only being 18 years old will do that to you. Hell, when I was his age, I wore neon-colored tights, combat boots, miniskirts, and spiked jewelry that I still have scars from. Walking into my office, I smelled the Damoiseau's cotton candy vape cloud before noticing his masculine silhouette. His shadow darkened the corner of my office that no light seems to be able to reach. That sweet smell made my stomach rumble, but my gut was telling me a different story, that I needed to tread carefully with this guy.
Dame Katz?
A smooth, dark voice asked from the shadows. Dame Katz is my mother's name. You can call me Agatha. I responded, no use in beating around the bush. My name was boldly printed on the door, under the words, Private Detective. I walked past the stranger to my old oak desk. The thing had come with the place since the previous owner couldn't get it out the door. Sitting behind the wood gave me a sense of protection. False protection. Please, have a seat. I gestured to the vacant chair under the light directly in front of me. As he stepped into the light, I couldn't help but notice his well-tailored pinstripe pants going all the way up to his 3-button matching jacket, emphasizing his broad shoulders. The sculpted curves of his biceps and triceps pushed against the jacket's fabric, forbidding it to lie fully flat against him. He was strong. Really strong. His dark purple tie with a perfect Windsor knot flashed, catching the light, creating an allure I could feel drawing me ever closer as he finally stepped completely out of the shadow. His chiseled jawline was well-defined, even under a neatly kept beard. A strong, aquiline nose sat just above his slightly downturned, pouty lips. A well-shaven head with a smell of some kind of wood oil wafted my direction. Must have been a fresh shave from a barber. However, it was his big baby blue eyes just staring back at me that were the most dangerous feature. Those kind of eyes would let him get away with anything he wanted. His view was not as lovely as mine, looking at an old, grizzled face that had seen too many Lollapaloozas and Lilith fairs in her youth. Hair that has been dried and damaged from too many color dyes throughout the years, everything from neon pink to the raven blue black of my emo days. Now I simply sport jeans and form-fitting tank top with a cardigan. It wasn't the most glamorous, but it was comfortable. I had to take comfort wherever I could find it these days. I wasn't a spring chicken anymore, but I was still alive, and after everything I'd done, that was enough for me. As he sultrily strolled over to the chair, he unbuttoned his middle button, allowing him to slip off the jacket completely, showing that the lining matched his purple tie. Under his jacket, he wore a clean white shirt with dark purple cuffs and a 4-button pinstriped vest. With the jacket removed, I could see his well-tailored pants were tight, the way men wore them to show off their backside. And honey, he had an ass you could bounce quarters off of all day. In the front, I could see he wasn't carrying a gun, but he was still packing. He was making my lady bits quiver, and they only quivered for 2 things: a good, strong black tea and trouble. And baby, I was all out of tea. Observing his hand, I noticed a not insignificant diamond placed upon his ring finger. A guy like that is never single. "How can I help you today, sir?" I asked, pausing, waiting for him to fill in the blank.
Sir, Magnus Sarah daughters,"
he said, a bit nervously. Sarah daughters? That name rang all my bells. The Sarah daughters, also known as the Daughters, run most of the city. Taylor's the head of the family, a leggy blonde woman with 10 years of being the mayor under her belt and eyes on the governorship. Of course, her hands aren't entirely clean. Rumor has it she's got her fingers in the local thug business as well. Whenever bad news happens around them, they seem to make it all disappear before any proof is obtained. Cops call them the Teflon family since nothing sticks, at least the cops not on their payroll. I wouldn't trust a daughter as far as I could throw them, no matter how well they fill out a suit, even if it is one who married into the name. He must have sensed my trepidation, because he quickly filled the tension in the air with,
My previous wife was Kelly Sarah-Daughters. She died 5 years ago. This May.
He broke his eye contact to stare intensely at the floor. He took a drag from his vape before he continued.
Terrible car accident. The police said she'd been drinking that night, and the visibility was poor, due to the heavy rain. They said she must not have seen the turn, since there were no tire marks on the road. The car hit a tree. Head on. Even with all that rain, the car burst into flames. By the time the officers arrived, she had been burned so badly they had to use dental records to identify her.
As he finished, a slight quiver moved across his chiseled shoulders, a look I've seen plenty of times. Memories like those carry a bitter breeze that freezes to the bone. Taking a deep breath, he pulled his composure together and raised his head, a professional smile plastered on his face.
And now I'm engaged,
He said, with a newfound chipperness. With a tonal shift that quick, I couldn't tell if he was being genuine. He held out his hand with a disco ball-sized diamond ring. Must have cost some dame a pretty penny to buy that ring. I took in a deep breath and remained neutral. I've seen a lot of unhappy married couples. Hell, I was even in one once. The silence held in the air as I got more comfortable and he got more agitated.
I'm betrothed to Natasha Bolorma.
He finally said as the smile reappeared on his face. The psychiatrist to the rich and the famous? I blurted out before I could hide my intrigue. I put on her podcast to keep myself awake on those late-night drives. Not the gossip ones about her overindulgent clients. The ones that break down how people's minds work. After listening to some of those, it's fair to say we are all a little crazy. I brought my attention back. Now I know how he got such a beautiful ring.
Yes, we announced it on several online platforms, Insta.
He continued to speak, but all the platform names ran together in my head, causing my mind to wander. I tuned back in when he stopped listing every platform in creation.
Of course, I use my maiden name. My birth name, Jensen.
Platforms? Nah. I try not to read them unless I'm on a case. Too much doom scrolling these days. I've had enough doom and gloom for several lifetimes. I responded nonchalantly. If I take your case, I'll be happy to look it up in the archives of the library's Wayback Machine catalog. Let's cut to the chase. What brings a nice boy like you into the wrong side of town in the middle of the night looking for someone like me? I asked impatiently. Standing up, I turned on the kettle that sits on top of an old, run-down AV cart with one good wheel. The cart was pushed flush against the wall near the plug behind the desk. He took a second, taking a long drag from his vape and letting that sweet smoke fill the room before he spoke.
I've gone to several other private detectives, and they pointed me to you. I need your help,
He said, never breaking eye contact. I felt like there was a jab in his comment about other private detectives, but I'm not sure who would turn away a young lad like him in my profession. More curious than angry, I took the bait. What do you mean, other private detectives? I charge the standard rate, just like they do. I dryly replied, turning back toward him. I grabbed and shook the old can of green tea, needing to hear that familiar scratching inside to let me know I had enough before I tried to open the stubborn bastard. I would need a little caffeine boost after this conversation.
I know that. It's not about money.
He said, stepping closer, keeping his eyes locked on mine.
You're just the right woman for the job.
The flattery felt loaded with desperation, and frankly, it was working. If that's the case, then maybe I'll just double my fee, I said, smiling as my hand struggled to open the goddess damn lid.
Deal.
He responded, taking a step closer to the desk, leaning over and plucking the lid off of the can without ever breaking eye contact with me. My nipples hardened as I caught my mind thinking of what I could do with those strong hands. Thank goddess for the thick cardigan hiding my interest. In this job, the first rule is neutrality. Keep them guessing where you stand. Shaking off the trance-like state, his close presence seemed to put me under. I stood up, turning away to get a cup. I felt a bit like a mouse turning my back to the cat. I haven't agreed yet. What's the case? I asked, praying he wouldn't ask for my soul. Honestly, I don't know if I could have turned him down.
I need your help with a certain kind of problem,
He said vaguely as he took a step back toward the chair. I waited, knowing there would be more to the story. I grabbed the shark-shaped tea strainer from my drawer, an old present from my kid. I scooped some loose tea into it, biding my time.
I believe I've been cursed, and I need you to help me figure out who did it.
He said in a direct, matter-of-fact voice. You take down one wizard coven, and all the hysterical men come a-knockin'. The skepticism crept onto my face for a second before I could stop it. A knee-jerk reaction. I was able to bring my face back to neutral quickly, but this guy was good. Too good. He picked up on that flash and hurriedly continued with his cockamamie tale before I could stop him.
I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. My wife Kelly died 5 years ago. Then 2 years later, I fell in love with another amazing woman named Maria. Right when we were talking about marriage and looking at rings, she died from falling off a ladder in the garden. Now, my current fiancée, Natasha, has almost died 3 times since we announced our engagement, and that was only a month ago.
He said, before I could interject with any skepticism. He continued.
The first time, her tire blew out while she was driving down a hill. She was able to regain control over the car, thank goddess she had just changed the brakes 2 days before the accident. Another time, when she was asleep alone in the house, the pilot light on the stove went out and the carbon monoxide alarm's batteries had apparently died since they didn't go off. The only reason she lived was because she slept with the window open. That slowed the gas down, and I also came over a bit earlier than I usually do. I found her dizzy, confused, and she'd thrown up on herself. I took her to the hospital immediately. Then, just yesterday, while she was taking her daily morning walk, she stopped to tie her shoe. When she began again, an AC unit crashed right in front of her, right in the spot she should have been. My curse is killing the woman I love. I have to stop it before it kills Natasha too,
he said with a slight whimper of fear. Maybe your fiancés are the ones who are cursed. Have you considered you might have a type? I asked, trying to shake the seriousness developing in the room. He lowered his head and replied in a soft, defeated voice.
I asked Natasha. She said none of her exes are 6 feet under. Even her ex-wife is still around.
A tear rolled halfway down his face before he wiped it away. My shoulders tightened up as my stomach dropped. Something about a man crying filled me with a primal urge to help, only slightly less when my kid cried as a baby. My husband called me old-fashioned. Learned the hard way that sometimes a man just needs to cry, that they don't want a woman to try to fix every problem. My ex also used to tell me that I could cry, and it could even help me grow, whatever that means. I told him the same thing my mother told me when I went in for stitches for the first time in kindergarten. Big girls don't cry. I was going to need a stiffer drink for this conversation. I put the tea back in the container and pulled out my flask. I casually turned around to see Magnus looking back at me, fear shining in his eyes, hidden but absolutely present. Something had definitely spooked him enough to have him go around town spouting nonsense. I offered a questionably clean cup in one hand and a full flask in the other. The universal sign for, want a drink?
Whiskey?
He asked, confused, but seemingly pulling himself together. Whiskey? Ugh, no, that stuff is brutish. For times like this, you need a good, strong, fierce, womanly drink. It's tequila. I stated as I put the cup down in front of him and poured him a shot of liquid gold. Make your chest smooth as a baby's bottom.
Oh, no, I don't drink the spirits anymore. Just beer these days,
He replied, growing more worrisome at my lack of an answer to his proposal. Taking a swig from my flask, I allowed my brain some time to weigh the pros and cons of taking this possibly mentally ill lad's case. He looked too well put together to be having hysterical delusions. Besides, I needed the money, badly, as work had slowed to a crawl lately after the coven. They claimed to have put a curse on me. Maybe curses are real. My conscience was telling me to be a better person, Sure, after I fucked up my marriage, now it wanted me to do the right thing. Fine. I'd turn him away and encourage him to seek medical help. It would be a better use of his wife's money. Listen, lad, I don't think. His eyes darted to the corner of my desk, and before I could continue, he quickly piped in with,
I'll triple your fee.
Deal, I said without hesitation, as I drained the tequila from the cup as well. Guess I'm not a good woman after all. Come back tomorrow around 1 p.m. and I'll have a contract ready. I also need you to bring me the first week's fee, non-refundable, in cash before I begin. Once I have the cash and a signed contract, you can share your list of suspects, I said firmly as I walked to the door and opened it, indicating the conversation was at an end. Damoiseau sashayed out of my office with a small head nod and a bright smile. As the door slowly shut behind him, I let my eyes follow the path to the corner of the desk that had caught my guest's eye. There, laying in plain view for all to see, were 2 bills with the obnoxiously bright red stamp shouting, "Overdue." The word slipped out before I could stop myself. Ah, shit.